All right, good afternoon, everyone. Do you all have a decent lunch? Yes? Okay, great. Could I please ask for everyone that's actually just started to walk in, please move up to the front of the room so we can really maximize everything that Caleb's going to be talking about next. And we got more people coming in, which is great. All right, my name is Min Tan. I'm going to be the MC for this room, and I would love to introduce the next speaker. Caleb first started dabbling in the web when The Simpsons were funny, Pokemon was popular, and the word on everyone's mind was terrorism. In 2008, Caleb starts working in a design branding agency before leaving 7 years later to do something outrageously different: business public speaking coaching. COVID hits, he loses all of his face to face appointments. A friend asks him to help him with his company's website. Caleb falls back in love with coding again, and it's a career comeback. With his talk, HTMX, the new kid on the block, making web old again. Can you please welcome Caleb Tan?
Let's go back to 2002. Does anyone remember this operating system? Hands up. All right. Thank you for putting your hands up and for showing the rest of us how old we are. Does anyone remember this program? Oh yeah. It was amazing when it worked, and you wanted to boot your computer when it didn't. The reason why I loved Microsoft Front Page was because you could see code and design it at the same time. It's the OG IDE before Visual Studio Code was a thing. Most of you, or maybe some of you, may have traumatic flashbacks to web dev at this time. And talking about Microsoft, I'd also like to thank the rest of our sponsors for making today possible, and for me, the opportunity to help you wake up from your post-lunch coma. We've got this? We've got this, all right. But back in those days, the web was simple, wasn't it? It was HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Bring me back to those old simple days. But then we moved forward a few years later, and something called asynchronous JavaScript and XML came onto the scene. That's where, we as web devs could replace parts of the screen without replacing the whole browser. So you could have that interactivity within the browser. Fast forward to 2024, The Simpsons are no longer funny, Pokemon is still popular, and we now have a president of the free world who was once on The Apprentice with his catchphrase, "You're fired," again. This is the age we live in, but in terms of the web, we live in a golden age. We've got monorepo tools, we've got mobile and desktop, we've got build tools, testing, meta frameworks for mobile, desktop, whatever you like. It's wonderfully sophisticated, but also wonderfully complicated. Do all the devs, do you guys agree with that complication at all? Absolutely. Well, at the risk of sounding like Abe Simpson, old man yelling at cloud, or in my case, the cloud, I do want to suggest there are people like Carson Gross. He's an old, scraggly Montana professor who invented HTMX. Sorry, Carson, if you're watching, I meant to say you're a good-looking, old, scraggly professor from Montana who did design HTMX. And his idea was designed around the REST architectural principle known as HATOS. Now, what the heck does that mean? Hypermedia as the engine of application state. Let me say this in two principles. Number one, for UJS framework developers, you don't actually have to get data from the server as JSON. You can get it as HTML. Secondly, that HTML should have contextual information for you to know what to do once you have that HTML response into your browser. So in this case, in the form of hypermedia controls like anchor tags. It's an old school principle, and that's what HTMX is sort of designed around. So that is why I suggest that HTMX is the new kid on the HTML block, making the web old again. It was Carson Gross's idea to marry the simplicity of the old web and combine it with the sophistication of the new web without us trying to kick our computers outside our rooms. Let me argue that, okay, show of hands here, who is a front-end dev and a back-end dev? All right, we've got a good mix. Look, before you shoot my right ear off, maybe HTMX could make the web great again. Is it too soon to make a Trump joke? Maybe. But I am a front-end dev, and I would suggest that my talk is going to be centered around front-end tech and testing that out. So today you're going to find out what HTMX is, when to use it, when not to use it, and we'll have a little bit of a play and see how we go. But the best way I like to define HTMX, it's like a JS pocket knife that extends HTML without writing a lot of JavaScript. That sounds really good to me, that blending of the two, simplicity and the sophistication. And with HTMX, it's a JS library that has all these sorts of features that you got access to without having to write a lot of JavaScript. Ajax, WebSockets, and server-sent events, debugging and scripting, it's all there. So how does HTMX extend HTML? Let's look at your typical website. There's a nav bar at the top, and that nav button at the top is most likely an anchor tag. Stock standard, right? At this point, this anchor tag lives, and you can interact with it or trigger it with a click. As soon as you click it, it sends a GET request to the server, sends back a status code of 200 with a successful response, and it will completely refresh the browser's state. So you've got one page on to the next. Pretty stock standard. HTMX, though, asks the question, why does it have to be an anchor tag? Can it not be any HTML tag under the sun? In this case, why can't it be a button? And instead of triggering it with a click, why can't it be a rollover? Or why can't it load on page load? Or when it reveals when you scroll up to it? And why does it have to be a GET request? Can it be put, or a post, or a patch, or a delete HTTP method? And when it sends that request to the server and submits a 200 code back, why does it have to replace the whole page? Can't it just replace a part of the page? It also asks the question about forms. Why is method equals post the only valid way to send a form? Can it not be patch, put, or delete? I would say HTMX asks the question to HTML, like an Asian dad says to his son, you could be so much more. That hit hard for some of you, hey? I love what some of the contributors on the HTMX project have done. Alexander Petros have even submitted that put, patch, and delete should be part of the HTML standard going forward. So that's one of the things that the forward-thinking people at HTMX wants to impact the web with. So why should you use HTMX? Well, there's 3 reasons why I think you should. Number 1, it's plug and play. You really can just plonk a script tag at your document head and you're ready to go. There's also NPM and Webpack available for it too. It plays nicely with other JS libraries and frameworks. You don't have to throw out your baby with the bathwater if you want to use HTMX in your app. Just consider using it in your existing app. I've used it in a SvelteKit application. In the demo, I'm using it with Astro.js. I've even used it on WordPress, and I've even used it on a Squarespace site. If it outputs HTML, you should be able to use HTMX. It also combines well with another JavaScript library called Alpine.js, and you'll see tutorials online. And thirdly, and probably my favorite, is that it's hypermedia on whatever you like or how. So if you have a backend, it doesn't matter what type of backend it is, as long as it outputs HTML, then you should be able to use HTMX. So let's go through the basics of HTMX. And there's a whole bunch of attributes you can add to your HTML tags to have interactivity with your app. So there's a whole bunch of attributes, but I'm not going to go to them systematically one by one. Let's just do a real demo. Okay, so this is my Astro.js website. This is the template that I'm wrapping my pages with, and this is what the app looks like for now. It's a basic 2-page website. There's a family page that I created, and it's got a grid of family members here. I've also made it so that if you get into the address bar, press /Q equals Maggie, for example, it filters that grid to specific members of the family. So if I put Q equals Simpson, it will obviously show all the rest. So it filters out the grid of family members. Okay, so all well and good, and this is, again, as I said, my Astro.js template. You can see I've got the HTMX script in line, ready to go, and here are the file-based routes that match and correspond with the web pages you just saw. So let's just open my home page, and I'm just going to add some content here. All right, let's say I want a button to load that grid of family members that you can see here. I want this grid to appear on the home page by a button click. So I'm just going to put here button, and I'm just going to press enter HXGet, which is my request that I want to send to the server. I'm going to put /family. I'm going to type in HX trigger, and that will trigger on a click. By default, it's actually a click, but I'm going to leave it there. HX target. So what I want to do is, when I click on this button, I want this family grid to appear in a div below. Next, I'm going to, okay, I think that's, I'm going to leave it there. I'm just going to put here, click me. And then below this button, I'm going to create a div. And I am going to call it family. All right. So what I've got here is HXGet. I'm going to get the family page. On the click of the button, it's going to load into the family div that lives below it. Let's see if this works. Click me. Bam, works. All right, but it's not looking that great, right? We've got a navigation bar that appears twice. What if I want to select an appropriate part of that Simpsons page? So just that grid. Well, if I go to the Simpsons family page, I'll see that there's a family members div ID that encapsulates that container. So I'll go back to my index page, and I'm going to type here HX select, meaning it's going to select that specific family members. It's going to select that specific grid. Let's see if that works on click. Bam. So you see it loads pretty performantly and the way I want it. But let's say I want that grid to load on page load. Let's change that. Let's go div ID, for all intents and purposes, I'm going to call it search results. And then I am going to close this div, remove click me, and I'm going to take this div ID out. I'm going to trigger this on load. I want the target to be this. I just want it to load within this search results of family members from the family page. Let's see if that works. Bam. Refresh that page. You'll see it's loading that grid. What you can do as well is create a search function without writing a line of JavaScript. So what I want to do is create an input, type equals search. I want to then go create a placeholder. That sounds good. Placeholder search for family members. HXGet equals /family. So I'm going to retrieve that family page. HX trigger is input. So every time I input into the search field, I want HTMX to fetch family and see if it filters those results. HX target will actually target the search results div that I specified below. And HX swap will actually swap out the div container completely. So you can actually swap elements within a div, or you can replace it completely. All right, and the one thing I'm missing from here is a name attribute. So I'm going to add name equals Q, because that was the get parameter that we specified before to filter out those results. So let us see what happens. All right, so there's the family search bar, not styled greatly, but let's just type in the word Bart. Awesome. Well, that sort of worked, but you've still got that nav appearing. So I'm going to go back and I will select. I haven't specified the select tool. So I'm going to put hx select equals family members. All right, try that again. Maggie. Nope. Why haven't you worked there? It's because it's doing the hx swap. Let's take this out. There we go. It's filtering now the family members, and I didn't have to write a line of JavaScript. Okay, I want to show and demonstrate one more thing, and that is within each family member, I've been able to create an edit field, and this edit field has an HX patch attribute added to it. So I'll show you what that looks like. HX patch equals family slash the record slug slash actions. I've created an API endpoint which has these request handlers that are listed there. So you can see HX, export const delete and get, but the one I'm interested in here is patch. So what's happening is if you submit a request through that form, it's going to submit it through the HTTP method of patch. It will go through this function here, and then it will out export or response with an HTML with success. So let's just see if it works off the bat. So I've got Maggie email description. I'm just going to put some text here. I'm going to press edit. And yes, there it is. That HTML response appears below that form. If I go back to the index astro for slug, you'll see that I've placed that div class alert there below the form to make it show up there. And all by calling the patch method and not defaulting to post. All right, so there's a few basics of HTMX there demonstrated. Let me go through when not to use it and when to use it. So firstly, use HTMX on your next web app if it's mostly text and images. If it's also CRUD-like, so CRUD stands for create, read, update, delete. If it's got that basic text replacement functionality. And also if you've got nested components with updates to well-defined blocks. So if you've got HTMX or you've got content that's sort of nested within each other in component blocks, HTMX is a good example to use. But don't use it if there's a lot of dynamic interdependencies. If you've got a lot of dynamic state going around on your app, probably stay away from HTMX. Or you could work on the edges, but your mileage may vary. If you require offline functionality, because you're making server calls, it does depend. Your offline function. So if you have an app that's going to function offline, HTMX might not work very well. But also, if your UI state is updated extremely frequently. So if you have like a browser-based video game, for example, HTMX might not be a great example. Now today you've seen a demonstration of basic HTMX and what it can do, but if you want to find out more, just head to htmx.org. It will do a very good job of explaining, much better than I did today, about what it can do for your next web app. Again, you can just scan the QR code, download today's talk. If you want to give me feedback, you can. And Min, how long do we have for questions?
Okay, we got 2 minutes for questions. So anyone got questions for Caleb? All right.
Thanks. I was just curious about when you reduced the content that you brought back so that you didn't end up with those double banners, was that happening after it had been sent back from the server? The point that I'm getting at is a performance one, I suppose. Is it retrieving all of that and then just extracting the bit that it needs rather than, or is there something happening here on the that I'm missing?
Yes, okay, let me just see if I can inspect. So the question was, is the whole body being imported into the home page and then it doing some magic to then export that div? I would suggest it's not. If I go to the network component and then just refresh that page, if I then get to the part where it's loading up the family div, you'll see that it is responding with with the entire page. So that's exactly what's happening. Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent.
One last question.
Cheers. I was just wondering how easy or hard is it to supplement the HTMX functionality with stuff that you would typically want to be achieving in JavaScript? So like with that search example, if you wanted to debounce that input and not be searching on every particular thing, have that timeout and stuff, is that easy? Is that hard? What does that look like?
That's very easy. So he's talking about debouncing and adding the debouncing method so that every time you do an input in the search field, you're not sending a request to the server all the time. All you do in that situation, if I can find it, is here, you put input, you put delay, and then maybe 500 milliseconds. Yeah. So it's pretty nifty. And again, the demo didn't demonstrate that. But yeah, you've got idiomatic terms you can use. But finally, it's my privilege to introduce you on HTMX, the new kid on the block, making the web old again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Caleb.
Thank you.